So Greg, again, thanks a lot to talk to us in Brazil, podcast. Like you said before, you stay in Brazil a few decades ago, right?
Yes, when I was very young, my father he traveled to Brazil on business, and my mom and I went with him. It was in like 76, I think, or 77, and I was pretty young, but I remember it was very hot. I remember that.
You remember what city you came? You came?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly where we went. I just remember it was at a hotel. I remember swimming in the pool. I remember actually making friends with It was a kid my age. He didn't speak English, but we connected and we were playing in the pool. I remember. So shows people in Brazil are very, very friendly.
Okay, okay. And how do you feel to you have your book published in another language
Oh, it's great.
after
Great.
almost a decade? Okay.
Yes. Yes, I was very, very happy. I think they did a great job. I have they did two versions I have here. They did the paperback and they did the hardcover here, which I didn't even
Yeah.
open yet because I just think it's so nice looking with the book cover, and it comes with a mouse pad and a
Yeah.
little keychain. But no, they did a great job because honestly, I prefer this cover over the original cover. This is the original cover,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
Eric Carr without makeup. I definitely prefer the one with makeup. I think they did a fantastic job
Yeah.
with this. And I was going to ask you, since I can't read the language that was translated in, did you read it yet? And how do you think that it reads?
That is fantastic job. Belas Letras
Good,
had an amazing, amazing job.
good.
It's very emotional book because it's a sad story in the end. No?
It is a
So
very tragic story. Yep, I agree. It is. I mean, it started off very well, his career in Kiss, and then towards the end, Eric Carr didn't seem like he was very happy being
yeah,
in Kiss anymore.
yeah. To the Brazilian fans, Eric is, I think, he's huge here than in US. Because when Kiss came to Brazil the first time, it was Eric Carr and Vinnie Vincent on the band.
Right. Yep.
But
Yeah.
of course, I didn't live in US, but to me, it's like Eric is a little underrated in US. You think that is true, or he have his size okay in US?
No, I definitely do think that he is overlooked a lot. His drumming on Creatures of the Night. I mean, I can't think of any other drummer that was able to capture that John Bonham sound as great as Eric Carr did on Creatures of the Night. The drummer on Billy Squire's "Don't Say No" album, I believe his name was Bobby Chenard or Chenard. I'm not sure how you pronounce his last name. He
Yeah,
came close also with replicating the very powerful John Bonham Led Zeppelin sound. But no, I think Eric Carr with Creatures was fantastic. I'm primarily a fan of 70s Kiss with the original lineup.
yeah,
That's the Kiss I listen to the most. But I do, out of all the other, but Creatures of the Night is one of my favorite Kiss albums. That's
yeah.
the one outside of the 70s that I absolutely listen to the most. And I put that album up against their 70s albums. I think it's that good and that special.
Yeah. Creatures is the open door for Kiss in Brazil, and the principal reason to Kiss came to here is in US they are in down, cause
Right.
Dynasty and Masked and the Elder make the popular of Kiss down, down, down. So they
Yes.
came to a new country to make little things, big things, because they play in stadiums with around 90,000 people in São Paulo.
Yep.
Uh, so for us, like I said, Eric Carr is much bigger than even Peter Chris. In here when we debated this, Eric and Peter was close side by side, with Eric Singer a little lower.
Right. Yeah.
But talking about your career, was being a biographical author always being something you aspired to?
No, it happened totally by accident. I always was a fan of rock music, and I always did well in English and spelling in school. And I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life when I was in college. I graduated college, and I didn't even have a major. I just did what's called liberal arts, which is you don't declare a major, you just do a little bit of everything. And after college, I was just working crappy jobs, and I got a job as a customer service rep at a local music magazine. And I saw how easy it was to write, and I started writing a little bit for them. And that was right when the whole entire internet started taking off. So I was able to get some freelance writing for sites like All Music, which I still write for a little bit. And eventually, then I started writing for Rolling Stone, Billboard, and then now I write for Ultimate Guitar, I write for Song Facts. So, and then about 15 years ago, I started doing books. My first book was called A Devil on One Shoulder and an Angel on the Other, the story of Shannon Hoon and Blind Melon, because although I love Kiss, I listened to a little bit of everything, and I especially loved the early 90s grunge and also alternative rock bands. And Blind Melon with Shannon Hoon remains one of my favorite bands of all time. And yeah, that was my first book. And then once I started doing books, then of course, Kiss is one of my all-time favorite bands. So like you mentioned earlier, so far I've done two Kiss books. I've done the Eric Carr Story, and then also this one here, which is Take It Off, Kiss Truly Unmasked, which
Yeah.
again includes Eric Carr and also the other Kiss members. But yeah, this focuses primarily on the non-makeup era, this book.
About Take It Off, launched in 2019. Okay, all right.
Yes.
Yeah. We covered the unmasked era. That era then Kiss tried to hide. I don't know why they tried to hide, but what led you to want to write about it?
Yeah, for the same reason you just said. When Kiss got back together with the original lineup in 1996, they pretty much closed the door on the whole entire non-makeup era for many years. Later on, admittedly, they started reintroducing some of the songs from the non-makeup era into set lists. But yeah, for many, many years, they just wouldn't play anything from it. It seems like over the last 5 years or so, though, there's been a new reappreciation of the non-makeup era. If you look at the top 10 Kiss songs played on Spotify, I think 3 of those songs are non-makeup era. So it seems like there's a whole new, well, not right now, but over the past 5 years, a whole new rediscovery and also reappreciation of that. It seems like it kind of went side by side with a lot of people reappreciated 80s metal in general. And I know here in the US, Kiss was pretty popular. They weren't as popular as they were in the 70s here in the US, but what happened was in the 80s here in the US, MTV became very popular in the early 80s. And that was right around the time that Kiss took off their makeup. And MTV really did embrace Kiss at that point, whereas they surprisingly didn't for Creatures of the Night. I remember I saw the video for I Love It Loud maybe just once on MTV. Whereas with Lick It Up, they had a big unmasking, and they also had, and they also played the Lick It Up video a lot as well. So, yeah, and also that album I fit in well with what was popular as far as mainstream metal at the time, with like Motley Crue and Quiet Riot and Twisted Sister. So MTV really got behind Kiss at that point. And from 83 throughout the 80s, they definitely played Kiss a lot on the station.
Yeah. Talking a little bit about you. Besides musical biographies, you also had some books published on sports, such as baseball, hockey, and football. American sports and Brazilian sports are a little bit different. Here we talk much about soccer, that you have talk a little more now because Messi, but volleyball, tennis, and basketball. But basketball, we watch NBA. The local league is not too strong. But what impact you have sports on your life?
Yeah, I mean, when I was younger, I played a little bit of sports, but not that much. I'm pretty much just a spectator. The same with also music. I was never in a band that put out an album or anything like that. It's just I've been a big fan of music and also watching sports on TV. And I live in New York. I don't live in New York City. I live right outside of New York City in a place called Long Island, which is about maybe like an hour train ride from, or an hour drive from the city. And on Long Island, there's several local teams that I've pretty much, when I started following sports in the early 80s, I just chose the 3 local teams at that point. With hockey, it was a team called the New York Islanders, which I've done a book on them called Dynasty. For football, a team called the New York Jets played on Long Island at the time. They then moved to New Jersey, but they're still called the New York Jets, even though they play in New Jersey. I did a couple of books on them, the best known being Sack Exchange, it's called. And then and then there's a baseball team called the New York Mets, who I did
Yeah.
a book about. And the New York Yankees are the most famous New York team. And I also did a book about them. And I do like the Yankees, but I'm primarily a fan of the Mets. But my wife's father came from Italy, and his favorite sport is soccer, or what you refer to as football, which is different from United
Yeah.
States football. But
Yeah.
he's a very big fan of the Italian football team. I know that.
All right. All right.
Yes.
Uh, and between your first book that you mentioned and your last book that was Word Infestation, the Red Story,
Yes.
uh, there have been a dozens of releases. And how do you choose the next topic to write about? And how you see your evolution in all these years?
Yeah, it's pretty much up to this point, I've just done books on subjects that I found interesting and that I wanted to read about. The last book I put out, like you said, was called World Infestation, The Rat Story. And admittedly, like I'm not right now at this point a huge Rat fan, but growing up, I absolutely loved Rat. Like I was really big into heavy metal in the 80s.
Yeah.
And again, it was just one of those things, like I always found their story to be interesting. And there was a TV series in the late 90s, early 2000s here in America called Behind the Music, and they would take a band and they would just it was usually a band that had some kind of trouble in their career, whether
Yeah.
either they broke up or like a member passed away or something happened that was borderline tragic, and they had a rat behind the music that to this day I think is one of the most interesting behind the music episodes ever, because they interviewed every single member, including
Yeah.
Robin Crosby right before he passed away. I think it was his last interview ever, or at least one of his last interviews ever. And I think you can find that still on YouTube, I think. So, whoever's watching this, if they want to watch that, look up Behind the Music Rat. I definitely recommend that. But by watching that, again, I always wondered why there was never a book that just focused solely on Rat. I know that a couple of members did their own books, but I really wanted to read a book that was about their whole history. So that's why I decided to backtrack and do that book. And I just happened to interview all the surviving members over the years. And then within the last year, I did brand new interviews with Stephen Piercy and also Juan Crocier. So yes, it just kind of the planets aligned, and I just realized it was now or never to do that type of book. So yeah, I did it, and
Yeah.
it's surprisingly selling very well. And also Stephen Piercy, very thankfully, has gotten behind it. He just shared a post about a month ago supporting the book. So yeah, it's turned out really well.
Yeah. I hope that came to Brazil too, like Eric Carr. I
Yeah,
will.
what's funny is I actually got in contact with the company that put out the Eric Carr story in Brazil, and I said, I have all these other books that I put out through a self-publisher myself. So if there's any of these books that you want to put out and translate, you're definitely
Yeah.
more welcome. You're more than welcome to do it. So yes, we'll see
Oh.
what happens. Hopefully more will be coming soon.
Oh, okay. I will talk to people on Belas Letras. We have some kind of connection because Eric Carr Day was the launch
Mhm.
of the book.
Okay.
I hope so. We have
Yeah.
much more Greg Prato books in Brazil soon. But
Hopefully.
uh, going back to Eric Carr's story, how did the idea this book come about? Loretta talks to you, you talk to Loretta. We interviewed Loretta last year,
Okay.
including, and is a very sweet woman. Kisses
Yes,
for
very, very
her.
nice.
Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, at that point when I put out this book, I believe all of the original Kiss members, or at least most of them, had put out their own books at that point.
yeah,
And again, at that point, especially way back then, that was when the whole non-makeup Kiss era was really just being glossed over. Like I can't remember which book, if it was Gene or Paul's, that like the non-makeup era was really just like an afterthought. I mean, it was included, but it wasn't really a big part of the book.
yeah. In
Oh,
Jean's book is more resume.
okay. Okay, right. Yeah, so just I like I said, I always am thinking of possibly interesting subjects to write books about, and also books that I would just want to read just as a fan of music. And I realized that the Eric Carr story would be very interesting because, again, his whole true story was never really put out there, and it wasn't told by the people that actually knew him. So yeah, I reached out to Loretta and I spoke with her a bit, and she gave me her blessing to do the book, and she was also a great help with doing the book as well and putting me in contact with people. And then I also had some pretty good contacts as well, just because of what I do for a living with doing interviews with bands and things. So yeah, I was just able to, again, it was just one of those things, just being in the right place at the right time, knowing the right people. And I guess just the fact that I've been a Kiss fan for so long, I pretty much know Kiss's history. I could recite the Kiss history in my sleep at this point. I've been a fan of theirs since 77, 78 was when I first started listening to Kiss. So yeah, so and I was lucky to see them on the Dynasty tour, and then I saw them twice with Eric Carr in the band on the Creatures that I mean on the Crazy Nights tour and the Hot in the Shade tour. I was able to see them. So yeah, so I just decided to go for it. And again, that's also another book of mine that's been a pretty steady seller. So I'm happy that it came out.
For me, I cry in page 4 with the letter of his dad and his mother and father, because using letters from the family to open the book is not a common strategy in biographies. How you did the idea? For me, is a human touch that other biographies don't have. And
Right.
like I said to you, I cry in page 4 since the last page. So,
No,
how is
right.
this?
Yeah, honestly, the book came out quite a long time ago, so I can't totally remember how that idea came about. But if I had to guess, it was probably Loretta Caravallo's idea, I would think, or she at least put the idea out there. And I thought, oh yeah, that would be a fantastic idea. Sadly, I remember Eric's mother died right in the middle of me writing the book. I remember Loretta wanted me to speak to Eric's mother just to meet her and talk a little bit on the phone, but she sadly passed away before I could even do that.
Oh,
But yeah, but it is a very moving letter, and then also the note from Eric's niece is also very moving as well. That's also at the beginning of the book too.
yeah. The book have some interesting characters. Uh, Bruce Kulick, Carrie Stevens,
Mhm.
Loretta Caravello, Gary Corbett. Did any testimonies in the book surprise you to the stories that you previously heard in a different way?
Well, I'm trying to think. When I interviewed Michael James Jackson, the producer of Creatures of the Night and also Look It Up, I asked him if, to his knowledge, if Ace Frehley played on the Creatures of the Night album at all. Because I know in the press, Gene and Paul have time and time again said no, Ace did not play on the album. He didn't even show up to the sessions.
Yeah.
But when I asked Michael James Jackson, he actually said no, Ace did show up to the sessions and did play on the album. He didn't remember what he played on, but he did confirm that, and that's something that I never knew before. So that was very interesting to hear. I also was lucky to interview Bob Ezrin for the book, who produced The Elder, and I asked him what was the story, what was the storyline of The Elder, because I could never figure it out. And he finally went on record to explain what it was about. And to the best of my knowledge, I think that's the only time he's ever done that. And I think that's the only
Yeah.
person that's ever really gone in depth as to what the storyline was. Because I know like Gene and Paul, Gene primarily has discussed it, but it's just kind of like not, he didn't go that in depth as much as Bob Ezrin does in this book, The Eric Carr Story.
Yeah. And was the absence of testimonials from Gene and Paul intentional, or was their choice?
Yeah, no, I reached out to them through a mutual acquaintance. My mutual acquaintance was kind enough to forward along a message to them, and I didn't hear back from them. So I guess that was their way of saying that they weren't interested. But what's interesting is, I remember like I did an in-person interview with Ace Frehley. It was maybe just like a day or two before I knew I was going to do this book. So if I just knew at that point I was going to do this book, I would have been able to ask him some questions and
Yeah.
it probably would have made the book. But I just was 1 or 2 days late. And then a couple years ago, I actually interviewed Paul Stanley for one of the sites I used to write for called Consequence of Sound. And that was about the Soul Station album.
Yeah.
So I talked to him about the subject of Eric Carr didn't really come up. I know I mentioned that I did the book Take It Off. So we talked a little bit, I think, about the non-makeup years. But again, if like I conducted that interview around the time of the Eric Carr story, I probably could have just said, hey, can I ask you some questions for the book? And, you know, he possibly would have said, yeah, sure. And maybe he would have been in there. But you know, the thing, though, too, though, is out of all the KISS members, Gene and Paul have gone on record the most with telling their side of the story about
Yeah.
what happened with Eric and, you know, how things maybe unraveled a little bit, because it's pretty well known. Paul talks about in his book that Paul and Eric weren't really seeing eye to eye towards the end
Yeah.
of Eric being in the band. You know, and then there was a lot said about some people think that it wasn't handled correctly towards the end of Eric's life with health insurance and stuff. But Gene and Paul, though, I'm pretty sure have gone on record saying that it's not what you think it is, but, you know, it's never really been totally clarified. So I guess we'll probably never really know what the true story is behind that.
Yeah. The health insurance and the dismissal history is probably the most two heavy questions on the book. Do you have a formed opinion on it?
Yeah, honestly, how I look at it, I interviewed people that were there. So they have obviously, you know, it is as close to firsthand as possible, but I mean, really the true firsthand would have been Gene, Paul, and Eric.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I wasn't able to interview either of those three. But I did interview people that were, you know, like for instance, one of Eric's best friends at the time was the KISS touring keyboardist named Gary Corbett, who's sadly no longer with us. He passed away, I think, a year or two ago. But yeah, he wasn't very happy with the way things went down. I know Carrie Stevens has also said in the book she wasn't happy. Loretta, I believe, if I remember correctly, said that she wasn't too happy with treatment of her brother.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, really, just you know, really, the most obvious thing that probably should have taken place is just Gene and Paul. And who knows, maybe this was said, but just hasn't been confirmed. Gene and Paul could have just said to Eric, look, you know, take care of yourself, stay in the hospital, however long it takes. The second you're well enough to drum, you're back in KISS. Don't worry about it. Just, you know, because I know Paul said, you know, just focus on getting better. But it's one thing to say focus on getting better, but also to reassure him,
Yeah.
you're still in the band. Don't worry about it. We have Eric Singer right now, but the second you're up to it, you're back in the band. Just don't worry about it. You know, that would have taken care of it, I think.
Yeah. Could be um, a good lie to him, even because the book says that they knew the real condition of Eric. The doctor said to him. So Paul said in a recent interview that he regrets of the form then he deal with that in that time. So I think this talks much, nah?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing like with Brian, and also, of course, I did an extensive interview with, excuse me, Bruce for the book.
Yeah.
And, you know, of course, Bruce and Eric weren't full-fledged members. They were paid on salaries. So, like, for instance, Bruce couldn't have gotten involved and said, well, you know, we should tell Eric, blah, blah, blah. You know, he just had to pretty much do what Paul and Gene said. So,
Yeah.
but I did interview a gentleman named Eddie Trunk, who I don't know if I don't know if he's well known in Brazil, but here in America, he's a very respected TV and also radio personality. And he was a personal friend of Eric's, and he talks about like the last conversations he had with Eric. Eric was almost like 100% convinced he was out of the band. He was telling him like, look, you know, saying to Eddie, look, you know, through your contacts, let me know if you hear of any band that's hiring a drummer. Like he even mentioned the band Whitesnake. He's like, just, you know, let me know what you hear out there because I'm probably gonna be out of a gig. So that's also kind of sad too. But again, I mean, I'm sure if we spoke to Gene and Paul, they would have something, you know, they would have their side of the story. So again, until they get in depth about it, we probably won't know the true story.
Yeah. About Eddie, a few years ago when we had VH1 in Brazil, I watched all the episodes of that metal show. So I love Eddie too.
Yes.
And Greg, should we finish about the future? Do you have any upcoming projects that you can share with us? Anything related to Kiss, for example, or another bands, of course?
No, nothing is nothing related to Kiss.
Yeah.
I'm currently putting the finishing touches on a book that I can't really say what it is about, but it does have to do with a certain musical movement that was very popular in the 1990s. So I'm putting the finishing touches on that, and that's pretty much it. I mean, I'm trying to think that I mean, I just put out the Rat book, which is called World Infestation. I think fans of Kiss would probably, well, a lot of fans of Kiss would probably enjoy that because, like I mentioned in the book about Rat, here in America, I would say around 1985, the top 4 or 5 bands here in America, as far as hard rock and heavy metal, were Motley Crue, Rat, Bon Jovi, Kiss, and probably Iron Maiden. I would say were the top 5 as far as if you went to like the local magazine store and saw a rock magazine, it was one of those 5 bands on the cover. So so I would think most, especially fans of Kiss's Unmasked 80s era, I think would like the World Infestation, the Rat Story book.
Yeah. Greg, I want to thank you so much for giving me this interview.
No problem at all. I was going to say, just so people see, this is what the book looks like.
Yeah, I have my copy.
That's the new version. This is the original version. Oh, yeah, you got it. There you go.
Oh, okay.
So that, and then also, like I mentioned before, for anyone that people that read English books, this has not been translated into Portuguese. This is in English, but I think
not
this book
yet.
a lot of people would enjoy.
It's not yet, but we'll find a way.
I was going to say, hope it would be great if actually one day it gets translated. So this is through a publisher named Jawbone Press. So I should maybe put them in contact with the company that did the Eric Carr Story. Maybe they could work out a deal with those books that I've done for them.
I am absolutely I'm going to do this. Okay, Greg, I like to thank you also to give this gift because to me this book is a gift. It's a story that didn't tell. I really sorry that takes so long to came to Brazil. I have the original version, but it's not anyone to have this. And now we can see this story, and that's great for us. Eric Carr always be my favorite member of the band, so to me it means the world. And thank you so much to do this book. The Eric Carr Story, Eric Carr, a biografia in Portuguese. Greg Prato, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much.
Yes, you're welcome. Thanks again.